welcome to Global Business. I am Imewere Uhyomohai. Today on the program, we're dedicating it to the celebration of the AFDB Nigerian Regional Office Department that was opened last week in Abuja. And so, what is so significant about this building? First, let's tell you a little bit about the relationship between Nigeria and the AFDB. Nigeria joined the AFDB in 1964 when it started. In fact, the AFDB started September 10, 1964. In Nigeria was, the office of the AFDB in Nigeria was opened in 1971. But guess what? Beyond this, in 1973, Nigeria had a special trust fund of about $500 million for countries. And these are grants. That's not all. Guess what again? Nigeria is the largest shareholding country for the AFDB. They have about 13% of the shareholding in the AFDB. That's about $6 billion. So you see why a first permanent structure in Nigeria is a big deal, not just for the AFDB, which is the African Development Bank, but it's also a big deal for Nigeria. And of course, Kemi Adeosun, who is the Nigeria's Minister of Finance, went like the Oliver Twist, asking for more, saying, we shouldn't just have this building here. Nigeria should, in fact, be the West African hub for the African Development Bank. So the program is packed. We're going to give you, show you the building, show you the events that was at the commissioning, which was commissioned by the President, Muhammadu Buhari, who was represented by the Vice President, Yemi Osinbajo. And of course, we'll have a dinner with the President of the AFDB. Dinner, yes, a dinner talk with the President of the AFDB. Well, it's lunchtime, it's not yet dinner time, so let's go straight and know more about the relationship between Nigeria and the AFDB, and then we move on to the event proper for the commissioning.
Serving Africa. Each president has been true to the ideals of its founding fathers, strong and steadfast in fighting poverty and promoting sustainable economic growth on this continent. The bank has established itself as Africa's leading development finance institution. It's gone from an initial capital base of $370 million to one of $100 billion today. The bank enjoys a AAA credit rating on the international capital markets. In only half a century, it's mobilized and invested more than $103 billion in critical sectors of the economies of its African member countries. It's built infrastructure for transport, road, rail, air and maritime, and for energy and telecommunications. It's supported agriculture and industry, invested in Africa's private sector, helped build institutions and support good governance and accountability. It's developed human capital through investing in health and education, skills and technology. The bank works in African countries whatever their size and their means, and especially in the most fragile countries and with the most vulnerable groups. The bank gets close to its clients, to African governments and to African people. It now has offices in more than 30 countries. Over the years, the bank has adapted and evolved. In the 1970s, it introduced concessionary low-interest loans with long repayment periods, specifically for poorer countries. In the 1980s, it widened its membership and its capital base by including non-African countries. In the 1990s, it began to lend to and develop Africa's private sector. In the last decade, it deepened its work in fragile states and significantly increased its lending in the wake of the global financial crisis. And in this decade going forward, the African Development Bank is promoting growth that is not just strong, but truly shared and truly sustainable. Its quest for inclusive growth spans age, gender, and geography. Women especially are at the heart of its vision, not just establishing their rights, but unleashing their economic potential. Meanwhile, its quest for green growth is built on the best possible use of Africa's immense natural resources and on building sustainable infrastructure. In the last 2 years alone, 4 million Africans have benefited from bank water and sanitation projects. 10 million Africans have benefited in agriculture, 11 million have benefited in energy. 19 million have benefited in transport, and 49 million Africans have benefited in health. The bank is not just a bank, it's a knowledge institution, an advocate for Africa, and a vital force in multiplying the funds of others. The African Development Bank. 50 years old, 50 years serving Africa.
This new office complex will no doubt strengthen Nigeria's efforts and our desire for regional integration in the West African region. It is in this regard that I'd like to put on record Nigeria's strong desire and, if you may permit me, our demand to host the regional hub for West Africa here in Nigeria. We think that as the largest shareholder in the AFDB since inception, and the country with one of the largest portfolios, and also the largest economy in Africa, we deserve to be the regional hub for the AFDB, and therefore want to lend our voice to that sentiment that we would like you, Mr. President, to please convey this official and formal request to the senior management and to the executive board of the AFDB that Nigeria wishes to be the regional hub for the West African region. Nigeria, of course, continues to be an amazing place to do business, and there is credible and independent third-party evidence that the economy of Nigeria is on the right track. Just 3 months ago, the World Bank adjudged Nigeria to be one of the 10 most improved economies in the world in 2017 from the point of view of ease of doing business and investment climate. And non-oil exports, as at yesterday, were growing at a rate of 55%. Everything that we have said we wanted to do is beginning to come together. So this is an extremely exciting time to be here and to be in Nigeria. And Nigeria, and I say this with all sense of humility, is assuming its rightful place as the leader in Africa. Not the leader because we have oil, the leader because we have gone beyond oil. We are now going to be the leader in agriculture, which represents 26% of our GDP. We are going to add value to our agriculture. We are going to create jobs for our people. And we are going to create an inclusive growth that hitherto has eluded millions of Nigerians. And that is our focus. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, owing to AFDB's important role in poverty alleviation and development in Africa, Nigeria in particular needs the AFDB and its program of high fives, which encompass investing more in infrastructure, agriculture, education, healthcare, and increased access to affordable energy and water. The programs of the high fives favor pro-poor growth and inclusive development, both of which are desperately needed in our continent.
Since its founding in 1964, the African Development Bank has evolved into one of the most efficient vehicles for the economic development and integration of the African continent. the bank has faithfully played its role as a trusted advisor and an honest broker in our region, and has also earned its place as the voice of Africa on development issues. As the continent's premier financial institution, it is at the center of Africa's transformation to bring real and lasting progress to the lives of African people. While Africa has made significant strides in economic growth and in poverty reduction, much remains to be done. The goal is clear: to eradicate poverty, to create more inclusive socio-economic development, and to integrate the continent. To do so, the continent needs to promote growth that creates jobs and provides economic opportunities for all. To contribute to this agenda, the African Development Bank, through the high fives unveiled by Dr. Adesina when he took office in 2015, is, in our view, right on track, especially by investing more in infrastructure, especially power and water, agriculture, education, healthcare, and increased access, in particular, to affordable energy and water. More importantly, the bank is to be commended for its ongoing efforts to close the gender gap, empower women and youths, and to ultimately strengthen and expand social safety nets for our most vulnerable populations. With its large market of over 185 million people, Nigeria will continue to be an important player in the bank's work, advancing efforts to boost regional integration within the economic community of West African states, in particular, and Africa as a whole. We will continue to be a strong and committed partner of the African Development Bank and to lead by example. We've already clearly demonstrated through the partnership that led to the establishment of the bank's Nigeria Trust Fund, established in 1976. The trust fund of more than $500 million has helped to transform the economies and improve the living standards of millions of people in other African countries. In Nigeria, the AFDB, as we've already heard, has an active portfolio of close to $6 billion spread over 73 projects across public and private sectors of the Nigerian economy. These projects continue to create thousands of direct and indirect jobs in many parts of our economy. I'm particularly delighted that the bank is working closely with the administration in addressing the challenges faced by communities and people emerging from insurgency in the Northeast and some of the militancy in the Niger Delta region. The bank's Inclusive Basic Delivery and Livelihood Empowerment Integrated Program, aimed at addressing the challenges in the Northeast in particular, is commendable. The project will support youth, women, and IDPs who have returned to their communities. An estimated population of more than 10 million affected people are expected to directly benefit from this project. More specifically, I thank the President and Board of the African Development Bank for their support to Nigeria at a very difficult time during the 2015-2016 economic recession. When we requested support from the bank, the response was swift. The bank approved a budget support loan of $1 billion in November 2016. The first tranche of $600 million has been fully disbursed and utilized. And in my discussions with the president of the bank, we will be getting the remainder in form of sector loans. So we're looking forward to the remaining $400 million. That, as you know, with marriages, very frequently when demands are made, they are sometimes cut in half, but the other half soon comes along. The approval by AFDB sent a much-needed positive signal to the markets at a critical time for Nigeria, and for this we will ever remain grateful to the AFDB. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate the commissioning of this world-class edifice, I wish to reiterate the commitment of the Buhari administration to the bank's strategy in Nigeria. The strategy is fully aligned with our own economic recovery and growth plan 2018 to 2020. Again, congratulations to the President of the AFDB, President Akinwunmi Adesina of the Board of Directors, and the staff of the African Development Bank, all who have made this edifice a reality. I want to thank you very, very much for listening, and in the next few minutes, we will be commissioning this excellent edifice. Thank you very much indeed.
So we're here with the President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwunmi Adesina. I heard that today, so I'm used to calling it now. Of course, he's proudly Nigerian, and he's going to be telling us a lot of things. Remember that on Thursday, Nigeria celebrated the edifice, the first permanent structure of any AFDB office across Africa, except of course in Abuja. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much.
It's good to be with you.
Okay, now let's take this. What is the significance of this beautiful edifice to the AFDB Nigeria relationship, especially as it concerns development of the economy?
Well, first and foremost, let me say that it was a great honor for us to have President Muhammadu Buhari represented today by His Excellency Professor Yemi Osinbajo, and the commissioning of the building. It's a world-class building that we put up here in Nigeria. And this is the first time that the African Development Bank will put up a structure, any structure, that we will build outside of our headquarters since 1964. So that tells you how important it is. It's important to us for various reasons. First, Nigeria is the largest shareholder of the African Development Bank. And secondly, is the fact that Nigeria is Africa's largest economy, and therefore it deserves to have a very befitting building from the African Development Bank in Nigeria. And also, very important for us is the fact it cements a long-term partnership that we have had with Nigeria, which is 54 years old. And in fact, I call it a development marriage. And if you've had a development marriage since 54 years, with a lot of results to show for it, then of course that's something to celebrate. And so it was a great day. It was a great day for Nigeria, a great day for the African Development Bank, and a great day of appreciation and a recognition of the importance and the contributions of Nigeria to the African Development Bank. I will hasten to say that Nigeria is the only country that has a specially dedicated fund within the African Development Bank. In addition to its own shareholding of the bank, Nigeria created a fund that's called the Nigerian Trust Fund in 1973. And that fund has always supported low-income countries of well over $500 million since that time. Nigeria deserves it, and it's a big appreciation for our largest shareholder for all it has done for the African Development Bank and for Africa.
As if to buttress that point, the Minister for Finance, Kemi Adeosun, requested, in fact asked that Nigeria be the hub for the AFDB in the West African sub-region. What's your reaction to that? Because she has told you to go tell the management that that is what Nigeria wants.
No, I think there's no doubt in anybody's mind about the importance of Nigeria within this region. We have a process that we normally go through within the bank with our board of governors, our board of directors. But it's very exciting for us to hear of the very strong interest of the Nigerian government in having Nigeria office here also be the regional hub, and of course, it was very well noted.
Now, the African Development Bank released its Africa Economic Outlook just on Wednesday. And the Nigerian story wasn't very palatable, especially considering the fact that they said that 80% of its almost 119 million population are in poverty. And the bank calls this unacceptable. Why is this data, why do you think this data is really not in tandem with what is released probably quarterly by the National Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria?
Well, you know, I mean, the fact of the matter is that use any data you want. Poverty is poverty. And the fact of the matter is that it's a challenge that all African countries face, that, you know, a great share of the population actually lives in poverty, despite the fact that we've had significant growth rates. And don't forget, if you take all other African countries together, over 32 African countries grew at 3 to 5% last year. And in fact, 12 countries grew at well above 5% last year. And so the issue is not so much about the growth, it's really the inclusiveness of the growth and how much the growth process is able to carry millions of people out of poverty. I think what you find in general all across Africa is that it seems to be quite structural, that the growth process doesn't carry lots of people in the rural economy with it. And when you have over 70% of the population that's locked in poverty, structural poverty in the rural area, that explains that particular challenge. I think the issue, however, is what's been done about it. I'm not going to quibble about numbers. I'm more interested in what's been done about it. I think that we at the African Development Bank are very strongly supportive of the economic growth and recovery plan of the federal government of Nigeria. And that's why within that particular strategy, by the way, they have a focus on social services, provision of social services. And, you know, for example, we have provided $253 million to support poor people in the northeast of Nigeria that are suffering from basically the impact of Boko Haram destruction in many of the areas. Many of them have fled their homes and they don't have jobs, and infrastructure, schools and so on have been destroyed. And so we are helping quite a lot with that. We've also provided support to Nigeria of close to almost $15 million to support Say No to Farming, which is to deal with the negative impact of climate change on the agricultural systems that drive a lot more people into poverty. But take it, if you take a look at the poverty situation, I think what's even more we should be more worried about is the fact that a lot of young people are poor, and some of them that are working, quite a number of them that are working, are in fact are underemployed. Not only in Nigeria, but it's a big problem that we have in Africa. So as African Development Bank, we are very, very interested in seeing how we can help countries such as Nigeria and others to promote inclusive growth, to make sure that we can get a lot more jobs for young people. And that's why the African Development Bank would launch a major program. It's called Jobs for Africa's Youth. And our goal is to help African countries to create 25 million jobs over the next 10 years. We've got to move fast. You know, our young people, I sit as president of the bank, and sometimes I look at television and I see young people that fall off from boats on the Mediterranean Sea, and it really breaks my heart. And that's not the kind of future that we want for young people. We want an economy, or our economies in Africa, growing very, very well, obviously, but they also have to grow in a way that's inclusive. But also takes the issue of youth employment as the very center of it. So it's not just enough to say that I'm growing. People need to feel the impact of that growth. And that's why I say that it's very important for growth to carry millions of people out of poverty, but most importantly, to create a lot of jobs, and I mean quality, decent jobs for a lot of young people.
Now let's look at revenue administration. The bank describes the efforts by Nigeria as insufficient, and actually prescribes or says that 5% VAT is too low, one of the lowest in the world. Now, you're Nigerian. What do you think what are your prescriptions probably for revenue administration in Nigeria? And do you think, considering the fact that Nigeria, there's been heated debates for this 5% increase in 5% VAT, do you think Nigerians will accept an increase?
Well, you know, it's not for me. It's not my place to tell the Nigerian government what to do. We don't prescribe those kind of things for governments. The African Economic Outlook that you talked about was an analytical report. It looks at things from that perspective, but it's not a prescriptive report. And so it's up for countries to take a look at the evidence, and you look at it and you say, well, what should I change? And so we don't tell countries what they have to do. But I do say that, the question really though is that you have to still expand the fiscal space in Nigeria. I think that the issue of tax collection is very important. The issue of making sure that the tax net is quite wide, and I think I salute the efforts that is being made by the Minister of Finance in that. It's very, very important. Most countries that you see that are developed, they do so by actually mobilizing quite a lot of their resources from their domestic taxation. It's important. But the only challenge that you see is that you have a lot of poor people. And you also have a situation where many of them are reeling from the impact of negative shocks of the collapse of the oil prices and also inflation. And so one has to look at these types of fiscal measures and consider at the same time the impact on the welfare of the population. But at the same time, I think one of the things that I like that's been done here by the Minister of Finance is also looking at the quality of the expenditure, but also the efficiency of public expenditure. So you've got to look all the ways in which you can make more money, use money well, but make sure that the money is being used well to have the desired results that you want. But you must always put the people's comfort and welfare also as part of whatever decision one is going to make.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adesina, for speaking with us.
Great pleasure. Yeah. Thank you.
It's another World Cup year, and Nigerians are most likely wondering, will it be different this time, or will our hearts be broken again? Will our hearts be broken by football, just like it is by almost everything these days? Like when we read another article that refers to Nigeria as the sleeping giant of Africa, or that Facebook post that says that Nigeria has great economic potential, but that its potential simply remains potential. How many heartbreaks can we possibly bear? What if we attempt to start rewriting the Nigerian narrative? What if our economic potential could be harnessed to create a Nigeria with a thriving and growing middle class, with millions lifted out of poverty? It will be a huge task to rewrite the Nigerian narrative, but every story starts with one line. A million steps starts with one. That is why we designed Yocha. Yocha is a mobile app that will help you understand the Nigerian stock market, analyze Nigerian stock market data, make informed investment decisions.
Well, you should know that the relationship between the Africa Development Bank and the global business is not new. About 5 years ago, we were in Abuja, where the president, the first Nigerian president of the Africa Development Bank, was elected, Akinwunmi Adesina. And of course, you've listened to him on the program talk about some of the issues that concern Nigeria and the Africa Development Bank, especially concerning the Africa Economic Outlook for 2018. Well, we are here in Abuja this year. We may be in Ethiopia next time. Just join us next week. It's always nice doing business with you. I know you have enjoyed today's edition. Join us again. I am Imewere Uhiamokai. Have a great week.